Hello, everyone. My name is Jane Ingram Allen, and I'm bringing you this program today from my studio in Santa Rosa, California. And I'm going to show you how I make one of the living quilts. And this is a series of environmental artworks for outdoor installations that I've been making for the past few years. And this particular one is called Living Quilt for Steckborn. And it's in the peaks and valleys or delectable mountains traditional quilt pattern. And I'm making this living quilt for the city of Steckborn, which is in Switzerland on the shores of Lake Constance in the northeast part of Switzerland. And I was invited to do this art project by Judith Villager, who is the curator and runs an art center in Steckborn. The art center is called Haus zur Glocke, and in English that means House of the Bell. And so I'm happy to be doing this. Normally, I go to the place and make the installation there and involve local people. So I'm doing this video instead, since with the COVID pandemic, we're not able to travel so much now. So I wanted to share this process and, let you see how I'm making the quilt here in my studio. And then I will mail it to Steckborn and give them installations for how to install it. In April it will be installed, and maybe by that time there'll be some fewer travel restrictions, but at any rate I'm making it here and it will get installed in Switzerland in April. And I wanted to tell you about the pattern that I'm using for this handmade paper quilt. It has seeds for wildflowers in the pulp. And the seeds I'm using are in four colors. This is some blue wildflower seeds. And I'm going to, just put the seeds for each color in the different colors of paper pulp that I have here. And this is the blue flax seed, so I'm going to sprinkle a few in this tub of blue pulp. Now, handmade paper is created from plant fibers, and in these different tubs I have for the blue pulp, blue jean pulp. And blue jeans are cut up and beaten to a pulp in a factory, and then I get the pulp, and it's dyed with indigo, which is a natural dye. Other pulps I use an off-white colored pulp. You can see it in this bucket here. And then I dye it. You can see the red color and the yellow color that I've dyed in the buckets. And I use a non-toxic fiber reactive dye to color some of the white pulp. So I have blue, yellow, white, and red pulp that I'm going to be using for this living quilt for Steckborn. And here you can see one of the completed squares. I'm going to make 25 of these to put together to make a living quilt that will be about 8 feet by 10 feet to put on a prepared bed in a park in Steckborn. And this picture here shows a traditional quilt. And this particular quilt pattern is called Delectable Mountains or Peaks and Valleys. And I'm using this quilt pattern because the landscape around Steckborn and the Lake Constance has lots of mountains you can see in the background. And you can see the peaks and valleys of the mountains. And also, this is a traditional American quilt pattern. Was popular in pioneer times when the pioneers were going across the continent of America in covered wagons and crossing many dangerous but beautiful mountains. And so this quilt pattern refers to that. It also um, symbolically refers to the peaks and valleys of our experience of the pandemic in 2020, and, and hopefully for a better year in 2021. And so I'm using this pattern, and to do it, I'm making paper with these 8.5 by 11-inch molds, and it has screening on it. It's a wooden frame, and I have blocked off part of the screen so that you get the peaks and valleys pattern. And I'm going to put the handmade paper, when I form it, the sheet, on a piece of non-woven interfacing. I've gotten this interfacing wet, put it down here. And you can see I have marked off the size of the unit or the square that I'm going to make. And these will be put down on the non-woven interfacing. All right, so I'm going to start with a blue one over here. Okay, I'm going to stir this up. And this is the blue jean pulp, which is from cotton fibers. You go into the tub, lift the screen up, and shake it a bit to get it distributing evenly. I'm going to do 2 dips. I'm using a modified Asian method of paper making where you can go into the pulp in multiple dips, and I'm using something called formation aid in the pulp to make it possible to do multiple dips. So you can see now the paper is in the part for the blue square. And I have marks on here to tell me where I need to lay this down so that it will fill in the square with the 4 pieces of paper. And I use a sponge to take up some of the water and to press it. Okay, I'm going to hold the pellon and lift up the screen, and the blue pulp has transferred onto the interfacing fabric. And then I use a soft paintbrush just to make sure the edges are all stuck down well. Okay, now I'm going to use the screen and turn it this way to make the red pulp down that end. So come over here to the red tub, stir it up a bit, and it has seeds for red wildflowers in it. Sometimes you have to take off a bit here to get in the other parts that you don't want pulp. Okay, this is going to be down here for the red part of the square. Use the sponge again to take up the excess water and make sure that it sticks to the non-woven interfacing. Then lift up, and your paper pulp is transferred onto the piece of interfacing fabric. You have to be careful when you're doing the brush, not do it too hard or you will take some of it up. Sometimes you get a few bubbles in it, you can push those bubbles out to the edge. Okay, now I'm going to try to figure the next one. Be blue here, right? Yep. Okay. And again, this is blue jean pulp made from cotton fibers that have been beaten. And I put the fibers in a blender to stir them up and make them into pulp. Okay, looks about right. And I squeeze the excess water over here in a bucket. Yep, that one didn't come off too well. Probably should have pressed a bit more. Try to lift that up and straighten it out. Okay, now the red one will go over here. Okay, this is just the first layer of the quilt square that I'm making here. Now I'm going to make 2 layers, and I'm going to put some thread in between to give it more strength and make sure it holds together well when we put it out on the ground in Steckborn. Okay, that one came out pretty well. All right, now I'm going to try to make the background colors. I'm using yellow with the blue part of the square and white with the red part. So this, I think, will be, yep, that's the white one. So I'll do white first here. Stir it up and then dip. When you go in, you go vertically and then flatten under the water and lift it up. You can see the white wildflower seeds in this pulp. And this pulp is made from the plant called Musa textilis. It's a type of banana plant, but it doesn't have any fruit. It grows in the Philippines, and we call it abaca. So I'm putting this one here to fill in the background of that red part of the square. Use the brush to make sure it's stuck down well. Okay, now this should be the yellow part. So I'll come over here to the yellow tub. And it has seeds for yellow wildflowers in it. This stencil material is called Buttercut, and I order it from a paper making supplier. It's something like um, contact paper, but it's thicker. It has a sticky backing on it, and you can attach it to your paper making screens, and you can take it off after you finish this project and use the screen, of course, again to make normal 8.5 by 11 paper or other designs. The stencil material is really a good way to do this, so you can get a pattern and you can change it as much as you want to. Okay, this should fill in the other part of the blue square. And again, if you get bubbles in it, you just push them out to the edge and make sure this is all flat. Should be the white one for over there. Okay, I'm going to stop the video for a little bit until I finish filling this in, and then I'll show you the next step. Okay, in here, and it has a piece of paper in each of the colors, and I'm just going to make sure it's stuck down well. And you can see here that the alignment is a little bit off. Sometimes it overlaps and you have gaps in here, but that will be okay. It will fill in with the next layer. And I'm also going to put threads across to sort of weave it together. I think of this as kind of like sewing the quilt strips together. If this were a traditional quilt, it would all be made with fabric, and we'd have to sew all of these strips. I'm going to lace this cotton thread across here in a grid sort of pattern, about an inch or so apart, so that will help to strengthen this square and make sure it holds together well till we get it put on the ground in Switzerland, in Steckborn. So I'm going one vertically and one horizontally, and keeping them about an inch apart. And that's just to reinforce the square, make it stronger, and to take care of any problems with it not holding together until we get it on the ground in Switzerland. And I'm using a fine cotton. It's 100% cotton thread, so it's also biodegradable, and it will dissolve into the ground. Or maybe some birds in Steckborn will use a piece of this string after the paper pulp dissolves. And birds like to put strings and things they find in their nests sometimes to make it softer. So this thread will also either biodegrade or be picked up by birds or other animals to make their nest. And this project is a little different than most art projects that we want to last forever in their original form, which is never possible. Nothing is ever permanent. So in these living quilts, I'm going with the idea of intentionally making this to dissolve and come back as wildflowers. So hopefully in a few months in Steckborn, we'll be able to see a bed of wildflowers in this peaks and valleys pattern blooming in a city park there. Okay, I'm gonna stop the video again so this doesn't get too long and boring, but you can see I'll just continue with the strings here and come back when that's finished to show you the next part. Okay, now you can see that I have all of the cotton threads across both ways, and I'm going to use this paintbrush just to make sure they're stuck down good and won't come up when I start putting the second layer on here. And I'm using the thread in here. I found it's a good way to reinforce the big pieces of paper. This is, you know, a total of 22 inches by 17 inches. So the thread helps it to hold together and makes it stronger. And it's also biodegradable. All right, now I'm going to put a second layer over the top of this whole sheet. And I'm going to start with the background color. So I'm going to put the yellow one over the top of that part. So I'll go into the yellow pulp first. If you've left this sitting, you need to stir it up and make another yellow piece. You can see the seeds for the yellow wildflowers in this part. And the stencil material blocks out all of the other parts. Sometimes you have to put, you know, some of this back if it sticks onto the other parts of the screen. Okay. Let's see, it goes this way. Okay, and I'm going to try to lay it down so that, you know, the thing is going to fill in that square. So this part of the process is just going to be filling in the top layer of the square. Okay. And again, use the brush to make sure it sticks down well. And you can still see the threads through there. They don't show as much when it gets dry. And they are just in there to give it strength and make it hold together. All right, now this one should be the white one if we turn it that way. I'm going over to the white pulp. It has seeds for white wildflowers in it. And we'll lay it down so it matches up, hopefully. And using the sponge to press it and take out some of the excess water. Okay, you can see that has covered up the white part of this square. Use the brush to make it stick down. Okay. Now let's see, the one that will be, I need the try to do, yeah, that will, no. Oh, that one. That will be the blue one that goes there. You can see some of the seeds are pretty big, and that one is starting to sprout. If you leave the seeds in the water for too long, of course, they will sprout, but they don't sprout for a couple of weeks, and I'll be making this quilt in the next 2 weeks so I can get it mailed to Switzerland before they need to install it in April. It's best to install it in the early spring so that it can grow well and make lots of flowers for the late spring and summer. So this is going on the blue part. Using the sponge to take out the water and press it a bit. And the threads are sandwiched between the two layers. And again, the brush to make sure it lays down flat. Okay, and this should be the red one that goes there. Coming down to the red pulp. Okay, one more time. With this method of paper making, you can sort of adjust the number of times you dip into the pulp to make it thicker or thinner. And of course, you can also adjust the thickness of the paper with how much pulp you have in the water. So that should fill in the red part. And lift up the screen, hopefully. Yeah, that looks pretty good. To fill in that square. Okay, now we'll do the same over on this part of the square, and we're going to stop the video again so this doesn't get too long, and I'll finish this and then I'll show you the next part of the process. Thank you. Okay, now you can see the whole square is filled in. I put a top layer on the whole thing, and I'm just using the brush to make sure it's stuck down well. And the thread is sandwiched between the two layers of paper. And the next step in my process is I hang these up to dry. And so I'm going to just lift it up, and you can see the paper, handmade paper, sticks to the non-woven interfacing. And then I'm going to bring it over here and hang it on the clothesline in my studio. And this is just like hanging up the wash to dry. And this will usually dry overnight. It depends on the temperature. And then after it dries, you take it off this piece of interfacing fabric. This is one I made yesterday, and you can see it's dry now. The colors always dry a bit lighter, and it's easy to take this off the interfacing fabric. You just start at one corner and carefully peel it off. And then you can use this interfacing again, just get it wet and, make the next one on it. And I have a lot of thread hanging out the edges. I'll just trim that off and, flatten these out so that they will be ready to put on the prepared ground to make a living quilt, a real flower bed in a park in Steckborn. Okay, thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions. If you want to email me, my email is info@janeingramallen.com. And I also want to thank my husband, Timothy F. Allen, who is making this video. Thank you all for watching.